Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. You are about to listen to the Soulful CXO podcast with Dr. Rebecca Wynn. These conversations focus on the intersection of technology, business, and humanity, exploring how these three areas impact each other. Dr. Wynn interviews guests, including business leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts in various fields, to share insights and experiences on cybersecurity, risk management, and leadership. The podcast aims to provide a fresh perspective on how technology can be leveraged to create positive change in the world. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Soulful CXO. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca Wynn. We are pleased to have with us today Randi Levin, CEO of RSL Technology Associates. She is an innovative business and technology executive with experience managing large divisions. Former roles include CIO NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, CIO CTO City of Los Angeles, CIO Cast and Crew, CIO Forest Lawn, VP IT NBC Universal, VP IT Walt Disney Company, and VP IT LA Gear. Significant achievements include leading JPL's Information Technology Division and supporting successful rover and helicopter landing on Mars during COVID-19, and being the first public and private sector CTO or CIO to implement cloud-based email, Google applications, Gmail for enterprise. She advocates for women in technology, supports middle school girls STEM initiatives, and is a strategist, speaker, writer, mentor, and board member. Randi, my friend, it's so great to see you again. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How did you go from studying to be a professional French horn player to leading a team that did great work at NASA on Mars?
I started playing the French horn in the third grade, and I loved music. In college, my freshman year, my horn professor sat me down and said, Randi, there are 5 major symphonies in the country. They take 4 French horns. How long do you want to live with your parents? I called my mother and said, I love you, but I don't want to live with you the rest of my life. My mother's been very progressive my whole life. She said, I heard computers were the up and coming thing. Take a class, see if you like it. It was like a duck to water. They didn't have computer science then. It was management information systems. And that was it. I played the French horn on the side, but my career began with that degree and my first job programming on the Apache helicopter for Hughes Helicopters.
How did you work your way from being a programmer on helicopters to start getting CTOs and CIO roles?
Each job I took strategically. So be very planful of your next assignment and your next to make sure that you're always trying to move up and learning new things. So I think what I did is I went to Korn Ferry in their IT department and took on a small project. Then I went to Goldman Sachs and worked there in small project teams. And then my big leap was consulting. My first job was at Price Waterhouse before the Coopers. And I started managing IT projects, smaller to larger to larger. And I think the experience of being an in-house IT expert and consulting for organizations really bolstered my knowledge of how to manage organizations, how to manage projects. That allowed me to take my first real key job, LA Gear. It's been strategic, taking each position and learning as much as I could or can, even still, because everything changes every day.
Did you find challenges in being in those powerful roles as a woman? Just getting them open the door and giving them an opportunity? You've done it successfully, 6 or 8 different companies?
Well, I want to tell you the first story was when I graduated. In college, they say they're rolling out the red carpet for you. They want all these computer graduates. That was not what happened to me. I sent out 200 or 250 paper resumes. One company I interviewed with 8 times before they made a job offer. And he said, if you're going to be this persistent, you're going to be a great employee. Someone has to give you a break. This man was delightful, and I worked with him a couple of years. It is a challenge to be a woman in a male-dominated field. We have 18 to 20% women college graduates in computer science. The same as in 1983. We've been dipping down ever since. I have developed strategies for dealing with this through my various positions. I grew up in New York, so I've been tough anyway. There's a, you know, there's that tough side to me anyway, but I really always felt that my performance should be dictated and dictating where I go next and how I'm seen. I've always been honest, candid, and cared about my employees. And I've kind of let that take the lead. I certainly have not morphed into a man. I have seen some women adapt male behaviors, and I don't advocate for that. I don't teach women that. It's not how I think that we all need to be. We're females and we have different characteristics, but I think those characteristics are serving us well. They served us well during the pandemic because we're empathetic as a group. I think the nurturing capability is important because that helps develop our people. That's one of the big reasons CIOs exist. Not the only reason, but a main reason.
You said that you develop strategies that help navigate that minefield. Can you share some of those strategies with us?
I always wanted to make sure that I communicated clearly what I was doing and what the department was doing. So that was very deliberate. And I developed my own communication strategies for who I was communicating to. That is really important because people don't really know generally what an IT department does and what accomplishments not only I was making, but the team was making. So I'd say a big strategy there is communication and actively planning your communication. A second build the relationships with your peers, your colleagues. IT alone, technology alone, you can't implement by yourself. Developing partnerships and building strong relationships is key to your success in tech. Those are two things I was doing and continue to do.
When developing your communication strategy, did you just kind of figure out yourself? Did you go ahead and see what other CIOs were doing? Did you partner with the marketing team or sales team, client services team to help you out?
The first time I deliberately did this was when I was CTO for Los Angeles. I realized I'd have to present to the city council on television. Live. We didn't have a public information officer. Several departments do, like the LAPD, fire department, but I didn't have one. And I figured I need to learn and develop a communication strategy so that I can go in front of city council and be articulate and say what the issues are. And when I met with the mayor, made sure that he understood what it is we were doing and working on. Same thing with my peers. Same thing with the vendors who I consider partners. So no, there was nobody to learn from. Unfortunately, it was trial by fire, but it crystallized for me what needs to be done in terms of people understanding the work that we do, and more importantly, the impact of the work that we are doing.
Today is a little easier because internet is a lot more fruition. You can look and see what someone posted yesterday, and so you can get a feel, maybe at least what their personal brand is. But how do you suggest people do that more effectively? Because a lot of times it's a fast pace. You don't have necessarily always weeks or months to prepare for some of these meetings. How can you suggest that we bridge that gap as quickly as possible with the tools that are available today?
Certainly the tools are there. What's not there is the impetus to do the communication, and understanding who your audience is. And I think those things are skill sets that need to be developed in all kinds of project managers, department managers, because communication is a skill. It just happens. And you have to be very thoughtful before you put out these communications. You can see today what happens. People will put stuff out on the internet and then somebody reacts to it. And then it's like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. I think you have to take a step back and think, what am I trying to communicate? And how is it going to be received? People don't think. They need to think about how they're communicating and taking a step back, take a breath, think about it before it comes out, whether it's on TV, the internet, a podcast, a tweet, whatever it is. I think people need to really think about what they're trying to communicate. A lot of technical people communicate in technobabble. Most of the population doesn't understand what the technobabble is. And so I think people need to remember what it was like when they were a kid or when they were in school about just regular communication so that people understand what they're trying to say.
That's a challenge that ties into having strong stakeholder relationships. I'm interested in how people go about doing that when we don't have 90 or 100 days to establish relationships. Sometimes you get 90 seconds when you start a new company before they're trying to get you to be effective.
It used to be you had 90 days to just go and listen, and before you develop a strategy or a plan or, anything. And now it's like, what have you done for me lately in the last one day that you've been at our organization? So I think that there's ways to give your opinions when asked for, particularly in the beginning when you don't have adequate information, and just caveat it and say, based on what I know right now, this is what my opinion would be. I don't know yet the factors and constraints and culture of this organization that might impact my recommendation. If you caveat it that way, people understand. You've been there 5 days. There's no way you can know what somebody else knows. Drawing on your own experience helps because you can say, I have seen this at my last 5 jobs, and this is the way we've handled it. I'm not sure if that would work here, but I want to throw that out as a potential.
I liked how you stated that. And I haven't always been sensitive about saying, this is the way I've seen it before, work in similar organizations. Instead of saying, this is how I did it my last job, we did it this way, which even though you have good intentions, it doesn't come off well. Can you expound a little bit about how to be more effective communicator when you do see the company might not have the best process in place and you want to help them make a change, but not seem insensitive?
By the nature of technology, we're always introducing change. It's all the time, whether it's a new release, whether it's a new application, we're always introducing change. One of the things I do teach my women in my business is to explain why. And it sounds so simple, but people don't tell people why they are doing something, why the decision was made to do blah. I see it over and over and over again in many leaders across various sectors. And I think somehow either they assume people know why, or the organization doesn't want to be forthcoming with why the decisions are being made. I usually think it's the former. People don't take the time to think through how is this communication going to be received. And so they forget about saying why the decision was made to do whatever it was made to do. I really try and explain and be as transparent as possible. As an executive, you can't be transparent all the time because there are just things you can't discuss. But I think to the extent that you can be transparent and explain to people the thought processes that went into the decision, they may not like the decision, but at least they understood why something was decided upon and that there is some logic, not just that it was pulled out of a hat and had no thought behind it. So I think the communication of not just what's happening, but the why is important. And people understand this is why the decision was made. Okay, I don't love it, but I get it. And they move on rather than just sitting there going, wow, I really don't even understand any of this. I don't know why they came to this decision. It makes no sense. I think that what that tends to get the organization spinning and you want them producing.
How would you counsel people who are in organizations that want that tactical, fix first? And I think that's wrong. You're just going ahead, and if it's a dike and it's just kind of water seeping through, you just keep putting bubble gum or your fingers blocking that, and you're not thinking of why is it happening. True, don't get me wrong, you do have to stop the water coming in, but you're never asking about why is it happening and then what is the bigger picture to get it resolved. That's more strategic. And that's one place that I always like to start when I start a new company is I like to look and see what is the strategic imperative of the company? What's the strategic imperative of the department? I think that's part of the reasons why a lot of companies maybe get breached now. They're just looking for the solution of the day.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you're spot on. Most of the organizations that I have been involved with, I develop a strategic information technology plan. And I think that is important. It's a skill set that needs to be developed in people. And that really ties together the organization's vision, strategy, with then the technology strategy. And then you can go execute upon that strategy. It changes, but at least you have a direction. For an emergency, you go for the tactical fix, but hopefully that's not the norm. Those are exceptions. You should plan at a strategic level. Now, does an organization always want to fund the strategic direction? No, they don't. It's incumbent upon people like myself, you, Rebecca, to bring up the pros and cons. It might break again, but at least they're aware. If it happens again or something else breaks, at least you've put it on the record that there were risks associated with that approach.
Randy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Soulful CXO podcast with Dr. Rebecca Wynn, part of the ITSP Magazine podcast network. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then add this show to your favorite podcast player. Subscribe to the ITSP Magazine YouTube channel and share the ITSP Magazine podcast network with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to connect your brand to our conversations and our audience, visit itspmagazine.com to learn how to sponsor one or more of our shows. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.